For decades, one UFO encounter was locked away in silence. Not because it was fake, but because it was too real. Trained pilots saw something in the sky that broke every known law of physics. Radar confirmed it. Systems failed, and then it vanished. No explanation was ever given. The report was sealed. The data was erased, and the people who witnessed it were ordered to forget what they saw. But memories do not disappear so easily. This was not a story about lights in the sky. It was about intelligence, control, and something far more advanced than humanity watching from above. What really happened that night? Why was the truth buried for decades? And what does it say about humanity's place in the universe? This is the story they tried to hide. After many years of silence, something finally began to change. Governments around the world slowly released small pieces of information. Not the full truth, but enough to prepare people. Old footage appeared online. Radar data that had once been erased suddenly existed again. The same strange patterns showed up in different countries. Objects with no wings, no sound, no visible engines, and movement that modern human technology still could not copy. The pilots from the original encounter were much older now. Their hair had turned gray, and their bodies were slower, but their memories were sharp. That night had never faded from their minds. When the first leaks appeared, they recognized the details immediately. The impossible speed, the sudden stops. The way the aircraft systems failed for no clear reason. It was exactly what they had experienced decades ago. One of the pilots finally decided to speak. He did not choose television or public interviews. He recorded his story quietly, alone, in his own words. His voice was calm and controlled. He said he was no longer afraid. Whatever had watched them that night had not harmed them. It had simply observed and left. He believed the truth had been buried, not to protect humanity from aliens, but to protect humanity from itself. People would panic. Religions would be shaken. Governments would lose control. Wars could start because of fear and confusion. So silence was chosen. Not because it was right, but because it was easier than facing the unknown. As more encounters slowly became public, scientists began to study them seriously. Not as myths, not as stories, but as data. Patterns began to form. These objects did not appear randomly. They were often seen near military bases, nuclear facilities, and advanced aircraft. They did not seem interested in cities full of civilians. They were watching human power. This raised a frightening question. What if they were not here because humanity was weak? What if they were here because humanity was becoming dangerous? Humanity had reached space. Humans had split atoms. They had built weapons powerful enough to destroy the entire planet. Maybe that was the moment Earth became visible to something beyond it. Like a small fire glowing in the dark universe. Impossible to ignore. The encounters showed no signs of hostility. There were no attacks, no weapons fired, no threats. Just presence. Watching, measuring, learning. The objects appeared, moved in impossible ways, and vanished without leaving damage behind. Some people believed these beings were explorers, studying young civilizations. Others believed they were guardians, watching over developing worlds. A few feared they were judges, deciding which species deserved to survive. But one idea slowly became stronger than the rest. Humanity was being tested. Throughout history, humans had always believed they stood at the top. Kings ruled empires. Nations fought for power. Every time technology advanced, arrogance followed. Wars proved again and again that humans struggled to control their own strength. Maybe the Watchers wanted to see if humanity would repeat the same mistakes on a larger scale. If humans reached the stars while still fighting each other, the damage would not stay on Earth. It would spread as public awareness increased. Something unexpected happened. People did not panic. Instead, many felt pride. Humanity had survived ice ages, deadly diseases, world wars, and near extinction. Humans had rebuilt again and again. If something advanced enough to cross stars was watching Earth, then humanity's story mattered. Our struggle mattered. Artists began to paint the encounters as symbols of awakening. Writers imagined humans standing tall before the unknown. Scientists worked harder, not out of fear, but out of curiosity and determination. Space programs gained new meaning. Exploration was no longer just about science. It was about identity. The pilots watched all of this quietly. For decades, they had carried the truth alone. They had followed orders. They had stayed silent. Now, the world was finally beginning to understand what they had seen. The buried encounter was no longer just a secret memory. It was becoming part of a much larger picture. Humanity was not alone in the universe. And more importantly, humanity was no longer invisible. Somewhere out there, something had noticed Earth, and it was paying attention. Years after the first leaks, the world reached a moment no one had expected. One quiet night, radar systems across multiple continents detected the same impossible pattern at the same time. Military bases, civilian airports, and even space agencies all saw it together. Objects appeared high above Earth's atmosphere. Not one, not 2 dozens. This time, there was no attempt to hide. They hovered silently in the sky, visible to anyone who looked up. They did not move fast. They did not vanish. They simply stayed there, calm and steady, like stars that did not belong. People around the world stepped outside. Cities stopped. Roads emptied. Phones pointed upward. For the first time in human history, the entire planet looked at the sky together. There were no borders in the air, no nations in space, just one world and the unknown above it. The objects showed no weapons, no aggression, no message. They did not land. They did not attack. They did not communicate in words. Their presence alone was the message. The pilots from the original encounter watched the news in silence. They knew this moment would come one day. What they had seen decades ago was never meant to stay hidden forever. It had been a warning, a signal, a test of patience. Governments were ready this time. They did not deny it. They did not erase the footage. They spoke carefully, but honestly. They admitted that humanity had been observing unexplained craft for decades. They admitted that the technology was not human. And they admitted that the truth had been hidden because the world was not ready before. Fear spread at first, but it did not turn into chaos. Instead, something stronger appeared. Unity. People began to ask different questions. Not how do we fight them, but why are they here? Not how do we hide, but what do they see in us? Scientists studied the objects closely. They noticed something important. The craft kept a safe distance. They avoided satellites. They avoided collisions. Every movement showed control and intelligence. Nothing about their behavior suggested conquest. This was not an invasion, it was an observation. Humanity began to understand the real meaning of the encounters. These beings were not reacting to human fear. They were reacting to human progress. Nuclear energy, space travel, artificial intelligence. Humanity was stepping into a larger stage. The universe had noticed that the watchers stayed for several hours. Long enough for the message to be clear. Long enough for every human to understand that the truth was no longer hidden. Then, one by one, the objects rose higher into the sky. They did not accelerate violently. They did not break the sound barrier. They simply faded into space. No damage was left behind. No destruction. No loss of life. Only silence. But this silence was different from before. This silence inspired change. After that night, humanity began to look at itself differently. Old conflicts felt smaller. Borders felt less important. The idea that humans were alone at the center of everything finally disappeared. If something advanced enough to cross stars was watching, then humanity had a responsibility. Not just to survive, but to grow. Education changed. Space exploration gained global support. Nations shared information instead of hiding it. Scientists collaborated instead of competing. Fear slowly turned into purpose. The original pilots were invited to speak publicly for the first time. They told their story without anger, without blame. They said the encounter had never felt hostile. It had felt like a moment of evaluation. One pilot said something that stayed with the world. They didn't come when we were weak. They came when we became strong enough to matter. That idea changed everything. Humanity realized the truth was never buried because aliens were dangerous. It was buried because humanity was not mature enough to face it. The encounter came too early. The world was divided, afraid, violent now. Humanity was different, not perfect, but aware. Aware that we are part of something larger, a universe full of life, watching and waiting. The watchers never returned in the same way again. But humanity did not feel abandoned. The message had already been delivered. You are not alone. You are being observed. And your choices matter. For the first time, humans understood that survival was not enough. Humanity had to prove it deserved a future among the stars. The buried UFO encounter was no longer a secret of fear. It became a story of awakening, a reminder of the moment humanity stepped out of the shadows of isolation. The universe had noticed Earth. And humanity had finally noticed itself. The truth stayed buried for decades, not because humanity was weak, but because humanity was not ready. That UFO encounter was never about fear. It was about timing. Something beyond Earth noticed us, watched us, and then waited. Humanity has changed since then. We learned, we questioned, we looked up instead of hiding. The silence that once scared us now pushes us forward. If we are being watched, then our choices matter. How we treat each other, how we use our power, how we step into the future. Because when humanity finally meets the unknown face to face, it will not be as victims or legends, but as a species that survived, grew, and stood together. And the universe will be watching.